The noon sun beat down on the open plains, a haze of heat rippling above the dust. A little girl stood in front of him, barefoot, trembling, her voice thin and sharp as a blade. "Can you take her instead of me?" she asked, pushing her older sister forward with desperate hands. Her words cracked, filled with a terror that no child should know. Behind them, the outlaw's revolver glinted, steady and cold. The rancher said nothing. His shadow stretched long across the hard-packed earth, the brim of his hat hiding his eyes. The horse beneath him shifted, nostrils flaring, leather creaking with the weight of silence. The younger girl clung to her sister, both faces smeared with dirt and fear, eyes flicking from him to the gun that waited at their backs. Flies buzzed in the heat. A tumbleweed dragged across the road, its whisper carried by the wind like an omen. The outlaw grinned, the corner of his mouth curling with mockery. "Well, cowboy? Which one you fixin' to save?" His voice was cracked leather, the drawl of a man who had lived too long in the shadow of cruelty. "Pick one, or neither walks away." The rancher's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Inside, memory clawed at him. Years ago, fever had taken his wife and daughter, leaving him alone on a ranch that echoed with ghosts. He remembered his little girl's face when the sickness stole her breath, the helpless weight in his arms as he dug the shallow grave himself. Now, before him stood two more children, dust-streaked and frightened, eyes so much like hers it cut him raw. Silence held him captive, but it was not indecision. It was grief, pressing down, refusing to let him voice the choice the outlaw demanded. To take one and leave the other was to relive the burial all over again, to let the past repeat its cruelty. He would not do it. The outlaw's patience wore thin. He stepped closer, the revolver gleaming in the glare. "Speak, damn you! Or I'll choose for you." The girls flinched. Sweat dripped down the rancher's neck, but his face remained stone. Then, at last, he spoke, his voice gravel low. "I'll take both." A pause. The outlaw's laughter split the heat, ugly and sharp. He threw his head back, the sound carrying across the plain. "Both? Hell, you'll be digging 2 graves by sundown." He raised his gun, mockery flashing in his eyes. The rancher shifted in the saddle, hands sliding slow to his holster. His lips twitched into the faintest smirk. "Then I'd best start with yours." The outlaw's face hardened, and for a moment time held its breath. Then came the crack of a shot, sharp as lightning. Dust leapt, horses shrieked, the younger girl screamed. When the smoke cleared, the outlaw was on one knee, clutching a bleeding arm, cursing through his teeth. The rancher's pistol smoked in his hand, his expression carved from granite. He spurred his horse forward, stooping low, scooping the girls onto the saddle before them. They clung tight, one on each side, their small hands fisted in his coat. The outlaw roared behind them, his curses scattering across the open land. His men shouted, answering his rage, their hoofbeats rising like thunder. The rancher bent low over the reins. The horse surged forward, pounding across the hardpan, dust exploding beneath iron hooves. Bullets snapped past, biting the air, a whistle of death at their backs. The girls cried out, their fear pressing into him, but he kept his gaze fixed ahead. He knew the land better than the men who chased him. He knew where the ridges cut narrow, where brush could swallow the trail, where a man could vanish into the folds of the earth. They raced toward a dry wash, the canyon mouth yawning wide. Sunlight beat down, the horizon a blur of heat and stone. A bullet struck rock to his right, shattering into sparks. Another hissed past his ear. He ducked lower, urging the horse faster, feeling every muscle coil and stretch beneath him. The older girl clutched his side, eyes clenched shut. The younger pressed her face into his shirt, sobbing words he barely heard until one slipped through, quiet and shaking. "You didn't leave us." For the first time in years, his throat tightened with something other than dust. He did not answer, but his grip on the reins hardened, his jaw set. He would not leave them. Not like before. Behind him, the outlaw's voice rose again, carried thin on the hot wind. Promises of revenge. Threats sharp enough to slice the air. The rancher didn't turn. He pressed forward, through the wash, into the canyon where sunlight cast deep shadows across the stone. The chase stretched on, the land swallowing sound until only the pounding of hooves and the ragged breath of the horse filled the air. At last, he pulled up on the reins, guiding them into a narrow cleft between two boulders. The horse stopped, sides heaving, foam flecking its mouth. Dust settled slowly around them, the silence returning like a held breath released. The girls slid against him, exhausted but clinging. He looked down at them, their faces streaked with dirt and fear but alive. Alive because he had not chosen one. Because he had chosen both. He scanned the horizon through the canyon slit, eyes narrowing at the faint dust cloud in the distance. They weren't gone. They'd come again. The outlaw, bleeding but not broken, would not let go. Still, for now, the girls were safe, their small bodies pressed close, their breaths quick but steady. For now, he had done what he once could not. He looked up at the blazing sky, the sun unrelenting, the land vast and merciless. His silence stretched again, but this time it carried weight not of grief, but of resolve. The story was not finished. The fight was not done. But he knew, as surely as the sun beat on his back, he would not ride it alone. And somewhere, carried on the wind, came the outlaw's curse once more, ragged, furious, and promising that this day's decision would not end here. The canyon walls rose like silent sentinels, streaked with sunlit red, the air dry and sharp as flint. The horse shuddered beneath them, breath ragged, muscles trembling from the long sprint. The girls slid from the saddle, stumbling onto the hard earth, their knees dusted in grit. The rancher dismounted slowly, every movement measured, his eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the narrow cleft. A faint cloud of dust drifted there, faint but certain, the outlaw's men had not turned back. They were regrouping, circling like wolves, and time was short. He crouched by the boulders, pulling a canteen from his saddlebag, offering it first to the children. They drank greedily, water spilling down their chins. The older one wiped her mouth with a dirty sleeve and studied him with eyes too steady for her age. "Why'd you take both of us?" she asked, voice scratchy but direct. Her sister looked up at him too, lips parted, waiting. He hesitated. The sun pressed heavy on his shoulders, and memory pressed heavier still. He thought of a grave dug too shallow, of a fever he couldn't cure, of a little girl he had once held until the light in her eyes went out. His throat worked, words refusing to form. Then, finally, he answered, his voice stripped down to bare truth. "Ain't a man alive worth a damn who measures the worth of a child?" The younger girl's face softened, as if she understood something far beyond her years. She leaned against him, small and warm, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir in the hollow place inside his chest. It was not peace, but it was the closest he had come. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint echo of hoofbeats. He stiffened, eyes narrowing at the dust plume that thickened in the distance. They were coming, no doubt more determined now, led by a wounded man with vengeance in his heart. He knew there would be no running this time. To keep the girls alive, he would have to stand and fight. He rose to his full height, scanning the terrain with the instinct of a man who had fought before. The canyon narrowed into a pass further ahead, a choke point where riders would be forced to enter single file. Rocks lay piled at the edge, loose enough to tumble with a push. The land itself offered him a weapon. He studied it with a soldier's eye, mind already calculating. The girls watched as he began his work, moving stones, preparing what he could with the little time left. "What are you doing?" the older one asked. He gave a faint half-smile, sweat dripping down his brow. Setting the table, he said, dry humor masking the tension. Guests'll be here soon. The younger girl giggled nervously, clinging tighter to her sister. The sound was fragile but alive, a sound he had thought never to hear again in his company. It steeled him more than any weapon could. The sun slid westward, shadows stretching across the canyon floor. Hoofbeats grew louder, voices carried on the dry wind. He crouched behind a rock, pistol loaded, rifle ready at his side. The girls huddled close, instructed to stay low, to stay quiet. His breath slowed, his heartbeat steadied. He had been here before, in war, in ambush, in the long silence before the storm broke. Then came the riders. Dust swirled around them, sun flashing off iron barrels and cruel eyes. They funneled into the pass, horses snorting, boots creaking. The outlaw led them, arm bound with a bloodied cloth, face twisted with rage. His shout cracked the air, a curse promising death. The rancher pushed the first stone. It tumbled, then another, until a cascade of rock and dust thundered down. Horses screamed, men cursed, the path choked in chaos. Shots fired wild, ricocheting off stone. The rancher rose, rifle to shoulder, and fired with cold precision. One outlaw fell from his saddle, another's hat snapped away by a bullet. The canyon echoed with the roar of gunfire, the clash of men and dust and fury. Short, sharp movements. Reload. Fire. Duck. The rhythm of survival. Bullets cracked past his ears, stone splintering beside him. He pressed forward, using the terrain, every shot measured, every movement deliberate. The girls stayed crouched, wide-eyed but silent, their fear held in small trembling hands. Through the haze of smoke and dust, the outlaw emerged, pushing his horse through the rubble, eyes fixed on the man who had defied him. His revolver lifted, his voice a snarl. "You could have walked away." The rancher stepped out from cover, dust clinging to his sweat-soaked shirt, eyes flat and steady. His pistol hung at his side, but his voice cut sharp. "I already did. Once. Never again." The outlaw fired. The shot went wide, striking stone. The rancher's gun rose with a speed born of necessity, a single shot cracking the silence. The outlaw jerked back, eyes wide, before he toppled from the saddle into the dust. The canyon grew still. The echoes of battle faded into the dry air, leaving only the rasp of horses and the shallow breaths of the living. The remaining men, shaken and leaderless, scattered like jackals, spurring their mounts out of the pass. Dust swallowed them, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. The rancher lowered his gun, his shoulders heavy, his chest heaving with the weight of survival. The girls broke from cover, rushing to him, clinging to his legs with arms that trembled but held fast. He placed a rough hand on each small head, the gesture awkward but steady. For the first time in years, he did not feel entirely hollow. He looked to the horizon, where the sun spilled gold across the wide plain. The land stretched endless, merciless, yet in that moment it no longer felt empty. He had not buried these children. He had saved them. Perhaps, in saving them, he had saved a part of himself. He gathered the girls, lifted them back onto the horse, and climbed into the saddle behind. The animal shifted, eager to move, and he turned it toward the open land. His ranch waited beyond the horizon, a place once haunted, now perhaps ready to hold laughter again. As they rode, the dust trailing behind them, the rancher's silence carried a different weight. Not the silence of grief, but the silence of resolve, the silence of a man who had chosen to carry what once he thought he could not. The sun blazed ahead, unyielding, the world vast and uncertain. Yet he pressed forward, no longer alone.